And the resignation of one of the PM's closest aides, Policy Chief Munira Mirza.
Sir Keir was walking back to Parliament with the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy after they attended a briefing on Ukraine at the Ministry of Defence. It's a walk of barely a couple of hundred yards, but that was still enough for the mob to surround the two politicians.
Responding to the intimidation of Sir Keir, the PM tweeted, "The behaviour directed at the Leader of the Opposition tonight is absolutely disgraceful. All forms of harassment of our elected representatives are completely unacceptable. I thank the police for responding swiftly." But Mr Johnson stopped short of apologising and is now coming under increasing pressure from senior Tories to limit the damage.
I would be saying to the Prime Minister, go to the House of Commons tomorrow, say how very sorry you are about the manner in which Sir Keir was treated yesterday.
We just witnessed something extraordinary at Downing Street, a powerful moment involving angry voters demanding the exit of Keir Starmer. But this wasn't just a spontaneous outburst. This wasn't just a group of frustrated citizens. These were voices trembling with years of betrayal who felt abandoned, unheard, and furious with the situation of their country.
There's no more money for you lot. £1 billion a year, fuck off. You're a communist, aren't you? If I look like one, fuck off.
The group in front of Starmer didn't just speak for themselves. They roared for a country teetering on the edge of disillusionment, and Keir Starmer stood there silent and exposed as a leader stripped of excuses, a politician no longer protected by media spin or party branding. What happened next might go down as the single most damning moment of his leadership, because this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a collapse of trust, of connection, of political credibility. And what we're seeing may very well be the beginning of the end, not just for Keir Starmer's leadership, but for a version of the Labour Party that's lost its soul.
Get Starmer out. Get him out. Get him out.
Let's break this down so we can understand exactly how the leader who promised strength, justice and accountability has come to represent silence, weakness and evasion, and how angry voices in a broken town might have just changed everything. Southport is a community devastated by the unspeakable tragedy involving 3 young girls, children taken from the world in a senseless act of violence. It's the kind of loss that sends shockwaves through a nation, and when communities suffer, leaders are expected to show up not just in body but in spirit, with honesty, compassion and most of all answers.
How many more children have died in our streets, Prime Minister? How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something? Time for change, Starmer. Come on, it's needed. How many more children? Is it mine next?
To his credit, Starmer showed up. But did he have answers? From the moment he arrived, it was clear this was not going to be a typical political photo op. The air was heavy, there was a storm in the crowd, and the message was clear. Prime Minister, your popularity has collapsed more significantly after winning an election than any other Prime Minister in modern history. But the biggest question is, what has led to this fall from grace by Keir Starmer? Is it because he essentially misled the country during the election and raised taxes in a way that no one was expecting or voted for? Within minutes, that storm exploded. Locals began shouting and demanding explanations, and Starmer was overwhelmed.
I think it touches a nerve with the whole country. It's awful to contemplate what happened, to hear for myself the experiences of the first responders, what they had to deal with. It's really hard to take in for anybody. It's not what any of them came to work for, but of course they're professionals and they deal with it. I think about the families, the friends, the loved ones, those directly impacted, and of course the wider community here. But there's no pretending, I think, that anybody in the country is not untouched by what happened yesterday.
One man in particular stood up, voice shaking with emotion, grief twisting into fury, and he didn't mince words. He accused Starmer of betrayal, of failure, of cowardice in the face of truth. His statement echoed what thousands across the country have been thinking, but have never had the chance to say to his face. The message is clear. These people believe Starmer has failed them. They also believe he had a chance to stand up, but chose silence, and this wasn't a staged confrontation.
Start with this. I think that there's a huge chasm now between the media and political elites and the British people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was listening to an interview on BBC Radio 4 at lunchtime today, and I was absolutely horrified to hear the reporter talking about what's happening and basically saying, you know, there's this awful group of far-right people who complain about immigration and they think that immigrants are doing violent crime, and there's absolutely no evidence to support that. The problem is we don't know, and you might remember before the general election, Robert Jenrick, MP, was talking about how he thinks it's wrong that crime statistics about migration are not released into the public domain, whereas perhaps they should be. But it also means reporters can't say, well, certain people aren't doing crime if you don't have the statistics available. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I was absolutely furious to hear Keir Starmer's speech today, not because he rightly condemned the violence, as we all should, but because of the contrast with when, you might remember, a couple of weeks ago we had violence in Leeds caused by the traveller community. And I remember on this very programme saying Leeds City Council putting out a statement saying, we're so terribly sorry, we haven't listened to the community, we will do better. And yet here we have a community that's being completely ignored. Millions of us who are absolutely furious about excessive legal migration, absolutely untrammelled illegal migration. I mean, how many people have come over in boats since Starmer became PM now?
About just under 2,000.
Just under 2,000. Yeah, you know, and then he talks about the far right using this as an excuse. But what's Starmer doing? He's using this as an excuse to deflect attention away from the problems of illegal migration, from the problems of those anti-Semitic hate marches that we see week in, week out, that are policed in a completely different way to any other kind of march. He's using that as an excuse to basically point out.
It wasn't a political opponent. This was a lifelong Labour voter. An individual who had stood by the party during good times and bad. A person who felt Labour once fought for people like him, but now he looked at Keir Starmer and saw nothing. No fire, no answers, and no leadership. So how did we get here? How did Keir Starmer, a man once hailed as Labour's saviour, fall so far, so fast? The answer lies in a string of betrayals, not one, not two, but a repeated devastating pattern of letting people down when it mattered most. First, his response, or lack of, won to the national tragedies. Then came the economic fallout, skyrocketing energy bills, food banks overwhelmed, and working-class families pushed into poverty. Again, Starmer stood on the sidelines. He watched as chaos unfolded and only ever offered carefully rehearsed talking points which lacked passion and conviction and only had just empty professionalism. But even as the crowd grew more agitated, Starmer didn't break. He didn't stop, but walked away again. This wasn't just a PR failure, it was a moral one, and at that moment the public saw him not as a leader but as another faceless politician hiding behind platitudes. Nonetheless, it gets worse, because even as the crowd called him out, Starmer stuck to his script. Even as people demanded change, he offered none. And even now, as the backlash spreads online, as videos go viral, and as his party begins to whisper about alternatives, he remains frozen. Why? Because Starmer has never been comfortable with real emotion. He's a man of systems, not of soul, a prosecutor, not a fighter. However, politics is not just about policies, it's about people, and people are hurting. Add to that the new tax hikes and you will understand the frustrations of the crowd. Frankly, these aren't just political missteps, they're human failures, and the public has had enough. Inside Labour, panic is setting in, as MPs who once backed Starmer are now quietly questioning his future. Some are openly considering leadership alternatives. This is not personal, and it is not because they want to, but because they feel they have to, as they worry about the future of the party. They believe that if they don't act soon, Labour could go into the next election leaderless, soulless and hopeless. The big question is, can Keir Starmer survive this? Can a man so emotionally disconnected and so politically risk-averse truly lead a country in crisis? Can someone who walks away from grieving citizens be trusted to fight for their future, or is this the breaking point? We're watching it unfold in real time, the slow implosion of a leader who promised strength but delivered silence, who pledged change but stuck to the script, who once said he'd bring Labour back to the people but now finds himself rejected by the very base that carried the party for a century. The public is speaking louder than ever. The question is Keir Starmer even listening? Inside the Labour Party's headquarters, what once felt like the calm, ordered core of an election-winning machine now trembles under pressure. Every floor, from the press office to the political strategy wing, is gripped by a kind of dread that doesn't speak, it sweats. Staffers pace the halls with thousand-yard stares, coffee cups shaking in their hands. The confident rhythm of a party preparing for power has collapsed into a relentless barrage of damage control, contradiction and chaos. Nothing works anymore, as meetings are called so frequently that some aides have stopped going home. Pizza boxes stack in corners, lights stay on at 3 a.m. One exhausted staffer reportedly broke down in a stairwell, whispering through tears, "We're watching it all slip away." At the centre of it all is one word: hardship. But protests and crowds gathering against Keir Starmer weren't in Downing Street alone. It has spread to other parts of the country. West Yorkshire police had to be called to escort demonstrators from City Hall following chaotic scenes. The annual budget meeting had to be suspended just minutes in when protesters in the public gallery began chanting phrases such as "not a penny more." The gathering resumed an hour later, and the Labour-controlled council agreed to approve the increase by a margin of 6 votes. More than 100 people had gathered outside the venue to object to the tax hike before the meeting started. Labour councillor Joe Wheatley voted against his party's savings plan and said he could not support the rise, while urging the government to help underfunded local authorities. Going back to the events at the capital, the stiffness in Starmer's shoulders is not just coverage, it's a trial. BBC panels are no longer talking about Labour's manifesto, they're talking about Keir Starmer's soul. Is he cold? Is he disconnected? Is he incapable of empathy? Even The Guardian, which has long shielded Starmer from harsher criticism, turned. Their editorial didn't just criticise him, it condemned him, calling him the leader who walked away. It is not a headline, it is an obituary one that reads like a eulogy. For moral authority, Starmer may never recover online. It's worse on social media. The hashtags burn Starmer walks, Labour collapse, no heart, no hope. These aren't just trending, they're shaping public perception in real time. TikTok videos dissect the body language and Instagram stories turn the clip into black and white montages set to sad piano music.
The Cobra meeting was to coordinate our response to the disorder, and I made it very clear on a number of occasions that those involved will feel the full force of the law. So we coordinated, we went through some of the numbers. Over 400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week. That should send a very powerful message to anybody involved, either directly or online, that you are likely to be dealt with within a week, and that nobody, but nobody, should be involving themselves in this disorder.
There have been a lot of warnings already about more disruption tomorrow. Are you worried that this could escalate even further tomorrow?
We obviously went through the available intelligence, the deployment of officers, because our first duty is to ensure that our communities are safe. And that's why I say, again, anybody involving themselves in this disorder is going to feel the full force of the law. As I say, 400 arrests, 100 charges, people already in court, and a substantive sentencing by the end of this week. So within a week, the criminal justice system really has shown the robust and swift response that I think is very important, sending a message in circumstances like this.
It was clear that Starmer didn't just fail, he broke a covenant with the voters who stuck with Labour through thick and thin. With the people who believed, even after Blair, even after Corbyn, that Labour would still fight for the voiceless. And now they're asking who he is fighting for as the head of the country's government. If you enjoyed this political firestorm, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating political content.